If you'd like to remember and recall all the British monarchs, this video will make you do exactly that in only a few minutes. Human memory is predominantly visual, and you can take advantage of that by visualizing what you need to remember and connecting it to something you already know. And that's what I'll do in this video. Picture each image in your head, and I'll connect them for you using a crazy story. When you want to recall the names of all the British monarchs, here's what to visualize. Picture the royal throne where the monarch sits. You know it's the throne of the British monarch because the British flag, the Union Jack, is on the wall behind it. Sitting on the throne is a Queen Ant. The first British monarch after the mergers of the kingdoms of England and Scotland was Queen Anne. Queen Ant sounds very similar to Queen Anne. So when you picture the ant sitting on the throne, that will link in your mind straight away to Queen Anne, the first British monarch. The second British monarch was King George, or George I. George I sounds like Judge None. Imagine a judge walks up to the Queen Ant and introduces a nun. He's a traditional English judge wearing the long black gown and white wig, and the nun is wearing the traditional black and white habit. When you visualize the judge and nun talking to the Queen Ant, you'll remember George I. After George I was George II, or George II. II sounds like shoe. So let's visualize the judge pulls off one of his shoes and places it on his head. The shoe is all the colors of the rainbow, very bright. Kind of a weird thing to do when you're in the presence of the Queen, but at least now when you picture the judge holding a shoe on his head, Judge Shoe, you'll remember George II. You'll never guess who came after George II. It was George III. The judge takes the shoe off his head and throws it through the air, and it hits another judge sitting in a tree. Why is this judge sitting in a tree? Because Judge Tree sounds like George III. And that's how you'll remember George III. The line of King Georges continued on, and the next British monarch was George IV, or George IV. That sounds like Judge Door, so we'll use that. The judge falls out of the tree and lands on the ground in front of a door. The door is covered in ornate decorations and is bright pink, just to make it stand out in your mind. Create a clear mental image of the judge landing on the ground in front of the door, Judge Door, and you'll remember George IV. After George V was William IV, or William IV. This time we'll use Will Yam Snore. The bright pink door bursts open to reveal a yam with arms and legs holding a long will. It's a will yam. The will yam is standing up, but it's asleep, and there's a speech bubble with Z's because the will yam is having a snore. Now, when you imagine that will yam having a snore, that will link in your mind to William IV. The next monarch after William IV was the iconic Queen Victoria. To remember Victoria, we'll link it to victory. The yam wakes up and climbs onto the top step of a podium, where it has a winner's wreath put around its neck and holds its fingers in the V for victory sign. It is victorious. Clearly imagine this scene of victory, and it will prompt you to recall Queen Victoria. Following Queen Victoria was Edward VII, or Edward VII. To remember that, we'll use Head, Wood, Heaven. Out of the sky falls a head made of wood. It hits the yam and knocks it to the ground, and then the wooden head settles on the podium. Behind the head are clouds and pearly gates, like the stereotypical description of heaven. Visualize in your mind an image of the head of wood with heaven in the background, Head, Wood, Heaven, and you'll remember Edward VII. Next, we're back to another King George again, George V this time. Another judge picks up the head, tucks it under his arm, and takes a big dive through the air. Dive rhymes with 5. Imagine the judge diving through the air, Judge Dive, and you'll remember George V, or King George V. After George V was King Edward VIII, or Edward VIII. Let's go with Head, Wood, Plate. The head of wood grows arms and legs, escapes from the clutches of the judge, and jumps on a plate that flies through the air like a magic flying carpet. Create a clear mental image of the head of wood on a plate, head wood plate, and that will prompt you to recall Edward VIII, or King Edward VIII. Continuing on, and the next British monarch was King George VI. For George VI, we'll use Judge Bricks. Yet another judge appears in our story and throws bricks at the wooden head on the plate. Not a particularly friendly thing to do. Bricks rhymes with 6, so when you imagine the judge throwing bricks, you'll be reminded of George VI. Following King George VI was Queen Elizabeth II. Elizabeth II sounds similar to lizard, bed, shoe, and that's what we'll visualize. The bricks thrown by the judge crash into the bed of a lizard. The lizard is lounging back in bed and it's wearing a shoe on its head. Picture that little scene, lizard, bed, shoe, and you'll instantly recall Elizabeth II, or Queen Elizabeth II. And there you have it, you've just memorised the names of the 12 British monarchs from Queen Anne to Queen Elizabeth II. Now, when you think of British monarchs, you'll picture the royal throne with the British flag, the Union Jack, behind it. Sitting on the throne is a Queen Ant, reminding you of Queen Anne. A judge walks up to the Queen with a nun, Judge Nun, George I. The judge takes off a shoe and puts it on his head, Judge Shoe, George II. The shoe is thrown through the air and hits another judge in a tree, Judge Tree, George III. The judge falls out of the tree and lands on the ground in front of a door, Judge Door, George IV. The door opens to reveal a yam holding a will and having a snore, Will Yam Snore, William IV. The yam climbs to the top of a podium to receive the spoils of victory. Victory links to Victoria. A head of wood falls out of the sky and lands on the podium with heaven behind it. Head wood heaven, Edward VII. A judge picks up the head like a football and takes a big dive. Judge Dive, George V. The wooden head escapes and jumps on a flying plate. Head wood plate, Edward VIII. A judge starts to throw bricks at the plate. Judge Bricks, George VI. And the bricks crash into a lizard bed where the lizard is wearing a shoe on its head. Lizard bed shoe, Elizabeth II. The 12 British monarchs memorised in only a few minutes. This is a fun way to memorise short lists, but if you're a student, there are faster and easier ways for you to remember and recall information. How do you memorise numbers, formulas, verbs, and adjectives? If you'd like to take the first step to memorising anything 10 times faster and changing your life as a student, sign up for the free video training at the Memrise Academy website. As always, please give this video a like and share, leave a comment, and please subscribe to my channel and get notified when I post new mind-blowing videos. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.